I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Peter Duran, Adjunct Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Peter, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about a situation right now that is still developing. The United States is continuing its efforts to broker a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. And this comes as Russia launched an attack on Kyiv, the deadliest the country's capital has seen in months. How would you characterize where we are right now in a potential peace agreement?
Well, Brittany, the peace agreement has the potential to collapse in front of our eyes. In the last day or so, President Trump has been browbeating Ukrainian President Zelensky on social media, and yet it was Russian President Vladimir Putin who took the opportunity to launch the largest attack on Ukrainian civilians in their capital of Kyiv since last summer. So if Vladimir Putin wants peace, he has a very violent way of expressing himself.
I want to talk about President Trump's recent social media posts being very critical of both President Volodymyr Zelensky as well as Russian leader Vladimir Putin. And we know that President Trump in the past, since he began this second term, has been very critical of Zelensky ever since that February explosive White House meeting between Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, as well as Zelensky. This is what he posted on Truth Social Wednesday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about here. This statement is very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia in that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama and is not even a point of discussion. He also added to this, the statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done. He then posted this about Putin on Thursday. I'm not happy with the Russian strikes on Kyiv. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. What do you make about these rebukes about both of these leaders, but especially that President Trump is more critical of Volodymyr Zelensky? He's publicly saying that the Ukrainian president has no cards to play.
Well, let's look at the Putin chastisement. Brittany, if all we needed to stop this war was simply to tell Vladimir Putin to stop, this war would have stopped a long time ago. Yes, you're absolutely correct to point out that President Trump has focused a lot of his attention on pressuring the Ukrainian side, but it's the Ukrainians who have given the Trump White House everything they've asked for. They have said, we will absolutely agree to a 30-day ceasefire with zero conditions. When the ball went to the other side of the court, to Vladimir Putin's side of the court, the Russians began to inject all of these poison pills into the negotiation process. These would be details that they insist the Ukrainians agree to, knowing full well that the Ukrainians nor the United States would ever agree to these things, such as U.S. and international recognition of Russia's stolen land in Crimea. Brittany, there is a U.S. law signed by President Trump himself which says the United States will never recognize Russia's stolen land there in Crimea. So in one sense, President Trump is not only negotiating against himself and the U.S. Congress, but also against Vladimir Putin, while the Ukrainians are saying, we'll agree to all of your terms just to stop the fighting. This is the very complex environment in which Trump finds himself in, but the main obstacle to peace, I should say, is Vladimir Putin, not the Ukrainians.
Let's talk about that Crimea piece, because President Trump told Time magazine Crimea will stay with Russia, and Zelensky understands that, and everybody understands that. It's been with them for a long time. So what do you make of that? Because that's a non-starter for Ukraine, that Crimea stays with Russia. So talk to us about that.
Well, I have seen many of Envoy Witkoff's statements, and unfortunately, many of them are not aligned with the historical facts. The fact is that Crimea and the Donbass, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, all of the regions that Russia insists it control as a result of this war, these are all Ukrainian territories. Look at specifically Crimea. Brittany, in the 1990s, there was an election in Crimea, and the majority of the voters there said, we don't want to be part of Russia. We want to be part of a newly independent and free Ukraine. That's significant. So by sending in his troops and saying, this is mine now, well, Brittany, the United States has dealt with armies and aggressive leaders like this in the past, and we always say for over 100 years, we will not recognize your stolen goods, your stolen land. That's important because if we do, we risk inviting endless wars around the world.